Let's talk about how to stop worrying and start living. So, this book is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. And you might know Dale Carnegie. He wrote some self help books. The most popular one is How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a great book. But this one I have found even more helpful and more practical, especially for the weight loss journey. Now, I didn't find this book until I was in maintenance mode for the first time. And when I read it, I thought, wow, I mean, there were several techniques that I realized I had already been using that were really helpful during the weight loss journey. But also, there were several tips I found in here that were helpful during maintenance because during maintenance, what I found was, when you're actually successfully losing weight, sometimes what happens is you kind of are, you're so focused on the goal, which is just, getting the weight off, that you can kind of be distracted from the actual reasons why you got overweight in the first place. And then when you finally get down to your goal weight and you're just maintaining, those things start to creep in, and it's important to investigate all that. And so this book was really helpful because what I found was that a lot of the roots of why I was overweight in the first place came down to stress eating, just, basically eating my feelings, being worried about things, and then using food to comfort myself. And so this book was really helpful because, the first thing is it showed me that I'm not the only one that struggles with worry. There are plenty of people like me out there who just worry about a lot of stuff all the time. And it gives me practical, tips and strategies on how to actually stop worrying. And that's the biggest takeaway that I have from this book is that worry is a habit and you can break that bad habit. Now, I will say full disclosure, I am still a worrier. I would say, like, I have not completely conquered the worry habit. I've gone from being like a worrier, like a constant, just under a constant state of worry, 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 to now, I mean, I generally do kind of tend to default to a worrying kind of state, but then I'm able to put it in perspective and to kind of laugh at myself, and I at least realize that I'm doing it. And because I can realize that I'm doing it, it helps it to be more manageable and I don't worry nearly as much as I used to. I read this book about once a year just to remind myself of all the different techniques and everything. And that's one thing I love about this book. Right up front, it says, look, there's nothing new in this book. This is old wisdom and we all know it. We know the truth of it. I mean, it's stuff from the Sermon on the Mount, really. Like, just think about today and don't worry about tomorrow. That's what really it all comes down to. But it's like we need to be reminded of these things. And, for me, I need to be not only reminded of things frequently, but also I need to hear a lot of different people's experiences about it so that I can, kind of like learn from other people's mistakes. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the main strategies that have helped me to learn how to deal with worry in a more constructive way and to become less of a worrier. So the first tactic, which I just really love, is live in day type compartments. And so this technique is exactly what it sounds like. It just means only think about today. Focus on your actions for today. Don't worry about yesterday. Don't really even think about tomorrow. Just think about today. And of course, when you're thinking about your weight loss plan, when you're forming that, it is good to think about the future and to think about, okay, what do I think I could do for the rest of my life? How do I want my life to look? But then once you've thought all that through, when you're actually just implementing the plan, it's important to just focus on just that day. And I found that that was really helpful, in my own weight loss journey when I would only focus on just today. Like, I'm just focusing on today's step goal, just hitting today's step goal. Or, I'm only thinking about, eating one meal just for today. Just, I'm not thinking about, oh, I've got to walk 42 miles this week or whatever the thing was, or, I've got to eat one meal a day for the rest of my life. I'm not thinking about that. I'm just thinking about today. And that makes things a lot less overwhelming. And really, living in day type compartments is about just living in the present moment, not living in the past, not thinking about the future, just trying to be present. And I've found it, there are certain days, if they're very, very stressful, sometimes it helps to even, constrain that more to like hour tight compartments or even minute tight compartments if it's something that's really, really stressful. And it's just been a very helpful method for me. Now, the next strategy is called the carrier method. And this came from Willis H. Carrier, the guy who invented modern air conditioning. And so he had this process that he would use to keep himself from worrying. And it was 3 steps. And it really appeals to me. It's the one I use the most often because it's just how my mind works. So the first step is to think of the worst case scenario. And this is what my mind does anyway. In any kind of like situation, that's where my mind goes, is like, what's the worst that could happen here? And for a long time, I tried to break myself of that habit. Like, don't think of the worst. That's silly, but it never worked for me. I could never, like let go of that. I would just always think like, oh, but this could happen. So that's step one, is to just think of the worst case scenario. Step two is to accept it, to accept that the worst case scenario may happen. And that was kind of a revelation for me, like, oh, I should just like say to myself, yeah, that actually could happen. Instead of trying to tell myself it probably won't, it was just helpful to be like, oh, yeah, that might actually happen, and just accept it. And then the third step is to then try to improve on the worst case scenario. And I found that using this method is helpful, especially to get me to try things. Like, for example, when I was forming my plan originally, I used this method. I didn't even know I was using it at the time, but basically, I was sitting there and I thought, okay, I think I could do intermittent fasting as long as I let myself eat whatever I wanted. Like, I think I could do that. But I was really afraid that if I said I can eat whatever I want, that if I did that for 6 weeks, I would like gain all the weight back that I had lost the previous year, which was like 15 pounds. And to me, that was the worst case scenario. And so I thought, well, okay, that's the worst case scenario. Like, maybe I would gain all the way back. So what could I do to prevent that from happening? And so I just kind of made a deal with myself, and I said, okay, I'm going to try this, plan that I had written down, and I'm going to try it for 6 weeks. But if I gain 10 pounds, then I'll stop. I have permission then to just stop the experiment. And then I would still have lost like, 5 pounds net. And so all of my progress wouldn't be gone at that point. And that gave me the courage to then try the plan and to really commit to it for a long enough period. I think that really needed to be tried to see if it was going to work or not. And I also used this method too when I was just trying to get myself to lose weight in the first place. I realized one thing that kept nagging me in the back of my mind was, I was afraid that I would lose the weight and that I would be unhappy with the weight loss. So in other words, I thought, I'm going to put all this effort into it, and then I'm going to be, unhappy for whatever reason. Maybe like I don't like the way my body looks, or it's going to look worse, or I'm going to feel worse about my body somehow. So I decided eventually to just accept that like that actually might happen. And I told myself, okay, if the worst does happen and I get down to my goal weight and it's just a terrible situation, I could gain the weight back. It's like Dave Ramsey says, like, well, you can get out of debt, and if you hate being out of debt, you can always go back into debt. And so like, just try it out and see how you like it. And sure enough, when I got down to my goal weight, I realized like, wow, I feel much better here, and I'm so glad I did it. But just working through that worst case scenario helped me to get the courage to at least try. Now, the next strategy that was really helpful for me was the idea of examining the record and seeing, what is the actual probability that the thing I'm worrying about will actually happen. And this was really helpful for me because I, again, tend to be a worrier about all the different things. And the worry would lead me to stress eat. So like one thing that I really started to notice was I would always get very nervous whenever my husband left, to go to work or whatever. My fear was he's going to get into a fatal car accident. Like that was just a thing on my mind. And it was almost like, well, if I think that it's going to happen, then it probably will happen. And so I would just, worry about this. And of course, when I would be nervous about that, I would want to eat. And I didn't realize just how often that particular worry in the past had led to me stress eating. And so I decided like, okay, I'm going to see like, what are the actual odds? And so I looked it up, and sure enough, the odds that a random person will die in a fatal car accident is like 1%. So you've got a 99% chance that will never happen to you. And so the thing that helped me was to then look at that statistic and say, wow, it is very unlikely that will ever happen. But then I had to also use the carrier method, which was then like, okay, so that's the worst case scenario. And I have to accept that. I have to accept that there is a 1% chance that that will happen to my husband. And then what could I do to improve on that? And I thought, okay, well, one thing we could do is just to be, diligent about being careful drivers. That's one additional thing we can do. So we don't use cell phones when we're driving, and we try to just be careful on the road. Don't speed, and just try to be a defensive driver. And so at that point, it gave me a lot more peace because it's like, okay, we've done everything we can possibly do, and now I have peace about it. The next strategy that's really helpful is don't saw sawdust. So, and basically what it means is you can't change the past. Things are in the past are in the past and you can do nothing about them. So using your time and energy to worry about them or to replay things in your head, it's just a waste of your life. And it was interesting to me to really start to notice how often I would be living in the past, especially with weight stuff. It was like, when you sit down to eat and the mean comments you've ever received about your weight can go through your head. I mean, I'm talking stuff from like grade school would still eat at me. And, just and various mistakes I had made in the past would also eat at me. And so, I have had to learn how to just let go of the past. And again, that's process. It's a lot easier to sit here and say that than to actually do it. But I have found that just forgiving things, absolutely forgiving everything that's happened in the past is helpful. It like lightens your load. And if you can really just let go of it, it makes the weight loss journey easier because then you're not haunted by those things when you sit down to eat. And I even found myself trying to saw sawdust for really silly kind of things too. Like I would be, actually losing weight with intermittent fasting. And then I would start to regret that I hadn't found intermittent fasting sooner. And I was like being all sad about that. Like, oh, I can't believe this taking me this long to learn how to lose weight, And so, but even that kind of thing can really get you down and it can hinder your weight loss, or even it can start to lead to weight regain if you really let it get the best of you. So what I found is helpful is if I do find that I'm worrying, about something in the past, just to remind myself it's sawdust, like there's nothing I can do about that, and then just try to move on. Now, the next strategy is really interesting to me, and that's just preventing fatigue. And this one's a difficult one for me because I tended to be the type of person who thought, it's never good to take naps. Like I'm a hard worker and it's difficult for me to relax. But what I started to understand is so many times worry is connected with fatigue. Like if you're tired, you're more likely to get worried about things, and just to start to recognize that I'm tired right now. So probably whatever it is I'm worried about, it's more because I'm tired. It's not actually truly something to be worried about. And so one way to prevent that kind of worry is just to, be more rested. So to rest even really before you're tired, to give yourself the opportunity to take a nap. Like if you have that space available in your day, just to give yourself permission. I had the opportunity, but I wouldn't give myself permission. But what I found is on those days where I'm feeling tired, if I just, lay down, take a 15-minute nap, I feel so much better and I get so much more work done. So I end up being a lot more productive when I rest. And this is especially helpful on the weight loss journey. My rules for myself are, when I'm walking, if I'm tired, I'll sit down and take a rest. Like I'm not in this to try to like set any kind of speed record or anything. It's just about doing the things consistently day in and day out. That's also why I take a cheat day every Sunday, is because I want to mentally relax from doing fasting one day out of the week. Now, another strategy that kind of ties into this one is to learn simply how to physically relax and the importance of that. Because if you can physically relax yourself, then it's much easier to emotionally relax. Because sometimes there are situations where it's very hard to think yourself out of that worried state. But if you consciously relax your body, it relaxes your mind too. So the book really talks about relaxing your eyes, just closing your eyes and really trying to relax the eye muscles. And I've found that very helpful. If you just take a moment to stop whatever it is you're doing and just be quiet and try to relax your eye muscles. It really does make a big difference in how you feel. And I find it helpful also to like relax the muscles in my jaw. I tend to kind of clench my jaw a lot. And if I can just take a moment or two just to really relax those muscles, then what happens is I feel a lot more relaxed and at peace about things. And so the last strategy I'm going to talk about from the book is the power of prayer. And I found it really interesting just to see all the different people in the book, the different ways that they had used prayer to help them stop worrying. The story that I found the most interesting was from Admiral Byrd. And he was in the Antarctic and he was going through this whole ordeal. He was in this place where the stove was leaking and it was poisoning the air around him, and he thought he was going to die. And the only thing that really pulled him through, he said, was that when he realized he was not alone, that God was there with him. And, many people in the book talked about that same experience of realizing, that God is there with them. And so praying, taps into that power. And I certainly found that was true for me in my lowest moment. I've had enough moment, that moment where I really did decide I've got to do something about my weight. Uh, in that moment, I did cry out to God and he did help me and he heard my prayer. And in that moment, I realized I was not alone. So this book, I highly recommend it. If you have issues with worry, I think you'll find that it's helpful, especially the very end of the book. The last part is just essays of people who, used to worry a lot and then they found ways to not worry so much. And it can give you a lot of really good perspective on life, because people in this book a lot of times they were dealing with situations that were way worse in a lot of ways than anything I've dealt with, and that can help you to realize, like, well, if they can learn how to stop worrying, I certainly can too. And this is the type of book that I love to have an actual physical copy of, something that I can underline and take notes in, and be able to refer back to, because like I said, I refer back to it very often, and I reread it at least once a year. And hey, if you're out there and you used to worry but you have a strategy that I didn't mention or something that has worked for you, be sure to leave it in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.